When I saw my nephew with his tool, I felt a strong desire. I couldn't hold back. Today, I'm going to tell you how I teased my nephew for a whole month until he couldn't take it anymore and came after me. My name is Jennifer. I'm 37 years old, and I'm married to Carlos, who is 45. We don't have children, but we still live in a big house in Florianopolis, a beautiful city that feels like paradise. Carlos works as a truck driver, so he travels a lot and earns well, but this also means he's never home, which is why I seek satisfaction elsewhere. Our marriage has always been good, but sometimes I felt lonely, especially on the nights when he was driving. That's when my sister asked me for a favor. Her son, Christian, who is my nephew, needed to spend a month in Florianopolis to prepare for an army exam. Carlos, being the generous and kind man he is, agreed right away. When Christian arrived, I was surprised by how he had grown a lot. He was no longer the boy I knew. Now, at 23 years old, he was quite an attractive young man, appealing to any woman. He was also strong. When he walked into our house, I greeted him with a smile. "Chris, you're already a man. You're so handsome and strong. You must be very popular with the ladies." He had grown up a lot. He was no longer the boy I knew. Now, at 23 years old, he was a very attractive young man. He was strong. When he walked into our house, I greeted him with a smile. "Christian, you're already a man. You're so handsome and strong. You must be very popular with the girls." I joked. He laughed casually and replied that he was too busy with training and studying to think about girls at the moment. I found it amusing how focused and serious he was, but at the same time, I noticed that I was beginning to feel something for him. He seemed different from other guys his age, and this difference caught my attention. That week, Carlos had to travel for work again, which meant it would be just me and Christian in the house. Christian didn't notice, but I had already started making moves to catch his attention. I had a plan that he didn't know about. It was something new and exciting that made me eager to see what would happen if I went out for the day. I was home alone with Christian on the first day. I decided to make a simple lunch. While I was stirring the pots, I realized that I was more nervous than usual. I felt uneasy because of my nephew, who is now a young adult. I didn't want to admit it. On the first day, it was just Christian and me in the house because Caro was away for work. I decided to make a simple lunch. While I was stirring the pots, I realized that I was more nervous than usual. I felt uneasy because of my nephew, who is now a young adult. I didn't want to admit it to myself, though. For lunch, I chose a sheer outfit that was a bit bolder than usual. I wanted to see how he would react, perhaps out of curiosity. When Christian came into the kitchen to help me, I noticed that he was trying to be as polite as possible, but it was clear that his eyes couldn't help but linger on me. Do you think this outfit is too much? I'm sorry if it is. I'm just used to being more comfortable at home. I asked casually as I set the table. Christian, a bit surprised by the question, smiled and said, "No, Auntie, you look great. Don't worry." During lunch, the conversation was relaxed. We talked about the exam he was going to take. I asked casually, as I set the table, "Christian, you look great. Don't worry." During lunch, we talked about the exam he was preparing for, and he told me about his training routine. I then mentioned that he was very strong and in great shape, a body you only see on television. He laughed and thanked me for the compliment. He said he was really dedicating himself. Then he asked, "Auntie, have you been doing any physical exercise?" I asked him if he had been exercising, and he replied that he was in good shape, but he didn't have any special routines. I said that I always had, and that he was just naturally that way. Things started to change slowly. My nephew seemed to be noticing what I was doing, but he was very respectful, so he didn't say anything. The days passed peacefully. That week, Carlos was still traveling, and I found myself increasingly curious about how I would seduce Christian. One afternoon, after lunch, I decided to wash the dishes and asked Christian to help me. He came into the kitchen with that calm and shy demeanor, willing to do whatever was necessary. "Will you dry the dishes?" I asked. While I washed the dishes, I asked him to help, handing him a dish towel. He agreed and started working beside me. As we washed, we talked about everyday things. He told me how he was adapting to life in the city and how his preparation for the exam was going. But I noticed that every now and then I was washing dishes when I noticed Christian staring at the curves of my top. I kept wondering if he was attracted to me. To see if he was, I deliberately dropped a spoon on the floor. I bent down to pick it up, and I felt Christian's eyes on me. I looked down at the curves my top didn't cover, and I kept wondering if I was attracting him. That's when I deliberately dropped a spoon on the floor, pretending I didn't know what I was doing. I bent down slowly to pick it up, and as I crouched, I felt Christian's intense gaze on me. I didn't need to look at him to know he was flustered and staring at what I was showing. I stood up with the spoon in hand and continued washing the dishes as if nothing had happened. But I noticed that Christian was different. He was quieter and a bit more nervous. Perhaps he tried to hide it, but I could tell he was fidgeting with his hands as if he seemed nervous, as if something was bothering him in his pocket. I asked him a question, and he looked at me a bit surprised. He quickly replied, "No, nothing, Auntie. I'm just thinking about the training." I smiled at him and said, "Don't worry. You're doing well, and everything will work out fine." We finished washing the dishes. There was silence. I noticed that the atmosphere between us had changed. Christian was clearly uncomfortable, and I knew that part of it was because of me, which was exactly what I wanted that night. I thought about what had happened. It wasn't just a simple tease. It was a new feeling, maybe a little dangerous, but at the same time, it made me curious to see what else might happen that night. After a seemingly ordinary day, I felt a restlessness within me. The fire that had been building up over the past few days was becoming impossible to extinguish. After making sure everything was in order in the house, I decided I went to Christian's room to see if he needed anything. As I approached the door, I heard him talking on the phone. I pressed my ear against the door, curious but also unable to resist. I was excited, and my heart was pounding. "Mom, you wouldn't believe it. She's amazing. She's testing me. I don't know if I can resist much longer," he said in a tone that was excited and nervous. My cheeks flushed as I heard that. I knew I was taking a risk, but what he said on the phone made me realize that Christian was no longer the boy I knew, but a man struggling with his own issues. "She won't stop. I don't know what to do. Just thinking about her drives me crazy." He said this in a tone that was excited and nervous. My cheeks flushed as I heard that. I knew I was taking a risk, but what he said on the phone made me realize that Christian was no longer the boy I knew, but a man struggling with his own desires. Something inside me ignited. My curiosity was now different, more intense. I decided not to enter the room at that moment, but what I heard kept replaying in my mind. It was obvious that he was feeling attracted to me, and the thought of that excited me more than it should have. I returned to my room, but I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, thinking about what it would be like if I decided to take things a little further the following night. I passed by Christian's room again, and once more I heard his voice on the phone. "She won't stop, man. I don't know what to do. Just thinking about her drives me crazy." This time, I couldn't sleep, so I decided to take a long, relaxing bath. While I was in the bathroom, I heard Christian on the phone. He sounded excited. I knew I shouldn't do anything, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. I listened to the call, and when he ended it, I waited a few minutes before leaving. I watched for a moment, and then I went back to my room. I didn't want to rush things, but I liked the idea that he was thinking of me in that way. I could tell by the way he spoke that he wanted me. That night, I lay in bed, smiling, knowing that this was just the start. It wasn't just about Christian, it was about the power I had over him and how it made me feel alive again. I decided to take a long, relaxing bath. When I entered the bathroom, I realized I had forgotten my towel in the bedroom. I smiled, knowing it was the perfect excuse. I called out to Christian in a sweet voice, asking him to bring the towel to me. "It's on my bed. Could you grab it for me?" I asked, trying to sound casual. When he reached the bathroom door, I said, "You can come in, Christian." I realized I had forgotten my towel in the bedroom. I smiled, knowing it was the perfect excuse. I called out to Christian in a sweet voice, asking him to bring the towel to me. "It's on my bed. Could you grab it for me?" I asked, trying to sound casual. When he reached the bathroom door, I said, "You can come in, Christian. If I step out like this, I'll get the whole floor wet," he said innocently. He hesitated for a moment, but then he entered, holding out the towel to me without looking directly at me. I noticed how nervous he was becoming, almost trembling, while at the same time trying to keep his composure when I took the towel from him. "If I step out like this, I'll get the whole floor wet." In an innocent tone, he hesitated for a moment, but then he entered, extending the towel to me without looking directly at me. I noticed how nervous he was becoming, almost trembling, while at the same time trying to keep his composure. When I took the towel from his hands, our eyes finally met, and it felt like time had stopped for a second. I was wrapped only in the steam of the bath, feeling the warmth of the water and the intensity of the situation. He quickly averted his gaze, embarrassed, and muttered something about needing to leave as he turned away. I couldn't resist teasing him. Our eyes met, and it felt like time stopped for a second. I was wrapped only in the steam of the bath, feeling the warmth of the water and the intensity of the situation. He quickly looked away, embarrassed, and muttered something about needing to leave as he turned away. I couldn't resist teasing him. "A bit more, please," I said softly, watching the nervousness on my nephew's face. I closed the door behind him as soon as he was gone. I leaned against the wall, feeling my heart race. I knew I was getting to him, but it was also affecting me. As I tried to sleep, I imagined what was going on. "More than that, dear?" I asked, feeling his eyes on me. "I hope I didn't bother you." I closed the door behind my nephew as soon as he left. I leaned against the wall, feeling my heart race. I knew I was getting to him, but it was also affecting me. As I tried to sleep, I imagined what was going through Christian's mind. Was he also struggling with his own desires, just like I was? The thought that he might be thinking of me in that way made me smile. Perhaps it was time to take the next step, but carefully to avoid going too far. It was late, and after a rather quiet day, I decided it was time. I thought about how Christian might be thinking of me in a sexual way. I was wearing a light nightgown, and I walked into the living room. He was sitting on the couch, watching TV. I went past him, and he looked at me. I stopped at the kitchen door and said I was going to get a glass of water. It was late, and I asked Christian if he wanted to rest. He replied that he wasn't sleepy and would stay a little longer. I knew he was nervous, but I tried to sound calm. I said that I was going to bed and that I'd be in my room if he needed anything. "Christian, it's late. Don't you want to rest a little?" I asked in a low, soft voice. "I'm not sleepy, Auntie. I think I'll stay here a bit longer," he replied, trying to sound calm, but I knew he was nervous. "Well, I'm going to bed. If you need anything, I'll be in my room," I said, leaving the question in the air as I reached the door. I looked back one last time, catching Christian watching me closely. His eyes couldn't look away from me. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. What had happened during the day was still fresh in my mind. I got out of bed and walked silently down the hallway to my nephew's room. I stopped in front of the closed door, listening to the soft sound of his breathing. I knocked lightly, and he asked me to come in. Shortly after I entered, Christian was lying in bed covered up to his waist, but he was clearly awake. I said in a low voice, sitting on the edge of the bed, "I can't sleep. I was thinking." I said in a low voice, "Christian, I haven't seen you talk much with me lately. Is everything okay?" Christian's voice showed that he was calm, but he was actually worried. "Yes, Auntie. I'm fine, but sometimes I feel a bit lost. I want to go out to parties, but I need to focus on my studies." "I understand," I replied gently, placing my hand on his. My hand on his. "Sometimes, when we're alone, feelings become more intense, but you don't need to worry." The touch of my hand seemed to calm him yet at the same time excite my nephew even more. I could see in his eyes that he was fighting against that desire. "You're special to me, Christian. I just want you to know. I sometimes wear very sensual clothes because I feel more comfortable that way. If it bothers you, I can dress appropriately. I know that men's minds think a lot of naughty things, even about their aunt," I said, laughing nervously. He looked at me with a mixture of relief and desire. "I don't mind at all. I'm sorry if I sometimes wear very sexy clothes. I feel more comfortable that way. If it bothers you, I can dress appropriately. I know that men's minds think a lot of naughty things, even about their aunt. I said, laughing nervously. He looked at me with a mixture of relief and desire. I don't mind at all, Aunt Jennifer. But it's like you said, when a man sees a woman like you, he gets excited right away, regardless of whether she is his aunt. In that moment, I knew the game was about to begin, but it wasn't time to move forward yet. I slowly pulled away and stood up, letting my hand slide across his. "Good night," I said. "Good night, dear. Sleep well," I murmured before leaving the room. Carlos returned home for a few days, and with him, our married life returned to normal. But now, there was something that only Christian and I shared, our connection. He was looking at me with more desire. The little provocations, the glances full of double meanings, all of it seemed to be waiting for the right moment. It was late afternoon, and we decided to have a barbecue to enjoy family time. Carlos and Christian were at the grill, talking and laughing, while I was in the kitchen preparing the salad and rice. The scene seemed peaceful, but I felt nervous. My nephew, who had been calm around Carlos, seemed more restless as I cut the vegetables. I felt a presence behind me. I thought it was Carlos, but when I turned around, I saw it was Christian. He was very close. I could feel every muscle of his against me. When he leaned forward a little more, my heart raced. He whispered, "No, I'm fine, but what are you doing here? Your uncle won't like seeing you away from the grill." I replied, trying to stay calm, but my voice was a little shaky. Chris smiled. I could feel every muscle of his against me. When he leaned forward a little more, my heart raced. He had a smile on his face. He whispered, "No, I'm fine, but what are you doing here? Your uncle won't like seeing you away from the grill." I replied, trying to stay calm, but my voice was a little shaky. Christian smiled. That smile I knew so well, and I replied in a low voice, almost a whisper. "He was busy with the meat. He won't notice if I give a little help around here." There was something in the way he said it that made my stomach churn with excitement and nervousness. He stayed there, close to me, while I continued to cut the vegetables, but I was having a hard time concentrating because of how close he was. I felt his body temperature and thought, "You're tempting me, aren't you?" I asked, half joking and half nervous. He replied in a playful and serious tone. I tried to focus on the vegetables, but I couldn't ignore how close he was. His body heat and the way he looked at me made me feel things I didn't want to feel. I asked, half joking and a little nervous, "But maybe just a little." He moved away, but only a little, and spoke in a voice that was both playful and serious. He went back to the grill next to Carlos, who had no idea what was happening in the kitchen. I stayed there alone, trying to regain control of the situation and my own thoughts. Later, during dinner, the tension between Christian and me continued. Carlos, for his part, noticed nothing. He was completely oblivious to what was happening between us. With Carlos away on another trip, the house became quiet again, leaving room for us and for the tension between Christian and me to intensify. I went to my room, put on a silk nightgown that was short and soft to the touch, and lay down on. I couldn't sleep, so I got up and went to Christian's room. I knocked softly on his door, and when he opened it, I saw that he was shirtless. His muscles looked really good in the light. He had a strange look in his eyes, and I felt like I wanted to sleep with him. I went to Christian's room and knocked softly on the door. I was a little surprised when I opened the door and found him sitting on the bed shirtless. His muscles were shiny in the light. There was something in his eyes that attracted me. I was a mixture of desire. I couldn't sleep, so maybe I just needed a little. I went to Christian's room and knocked softly on the door. I was a little surprised when I opened the door and saw him sitting on the bed with no shirt on. His muscles looked good in the light. There was something in his eyes that made me want to do things with him. I said, "I can't sleep. Maybe I just need a little company." My voice was lower than I intended. Christian looked at me for a moment, thinking about what I said, before responding. He was also awake. His eyes traveled down my body, enjoying the sight, and I felt the heat between us grow. I slowly approached, stopping beside the bed and asking, "Can I sit down?" I said, although I already knew the answer. He just nodded, making a yes gesture when I sat down beside him. The proximity made the excitement peak. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I knew I was about to cross the line. "My dear, do you want to play with me today as a celebration of your score on the theoretical test?" I said to him, excited. He replied in a firm voice, "That's what I want most, Aunt Jennifer. You provoked me a lot. Now let me enjoy a little. Don't be mean to me. Don't worry. My dear, you can enjoy it until the day you leave. I'll be your reward. Now you'll work very hard to pass the physical." I said to him, dying of excitement. He replied to me in a still firm voice, "That's what I want most, Aunt Jennifer. You provoked me a lot. Now, let me enjoy a little. Don't be mean to me. Don't worry. My dear, you can enjoy it until the day you leave. I'll be your reward. Now, you'll work very hard to pass the physical test." Soon after we kissed for a long time, I've never felt so relieved. When we finished, Christian said, I replied, saying that Carlos didn't take advantage of those curves at all. And with that, I have to hunt for fun on the street, but with him here at home, everything was perfect for me. The days passed. Carlos was still away, and the house, which used to be a place of refuge, was now a playground where every word had a double meaning. Then, Carlos returned from his trip, missing the bar. He went running to have a few drinks, and while I was preparing his dinner, Christian came from behind with that. Usually, when Carlos returns from his trips, he misses the bar. He goes to have a few drinks, and while I'm preparing his dinner, Christian comes from behind with that usual volume. "Calm down, your uncle is here today. Leave the bedroom door open, and I'll be there at midnight, okay?" he said in a calm voice, giving 2 kisses on his face. "It's just that, Aunt Clara. Now that I've tasted you, I can't control the urge to have you drive me crazy." My nephew replied, burning with heat so. He kissed me, and went to the living room. Carlos returned home, and after everyone had dinner, it was time to sleep. So when it was midnight and Carlos had fallen asleep from drinking so much, I went to my nephew's room. He was already prepared and ready to receive me as soon as I entered. I locked the door, and we started to get intimate. "Your body is so strong and hard, my love, and that piece of yours makes me shiver all over," Christian said, struggling to hold back the urge to kiss me. "Are you sure the cuckold is already asleep? I don't want him to interrupt our game." I gave him 2 kisses and replied, "Don't worry, my love." We started to get intimate. "Your body is so strong and hard, my love, and that piece of yours makes me shiver all over." Christian, struggling to hold back the urge to kiss me, asked, "Are you sure the cuckold is already asleep? I don't want him to interrupt our game." I gave him 2 kisses and replied, "Don't worry, my love. I'm only yours." We kissed and had intercourse for 2 hours. Then I decided to go back to bed so as not to worry my husband about anything. Christian kissed me and said that my husband doesn't know what is missing, and continued, "Don't worry. He doesn't do what I do." Jennifer replied with a loving, "Look, your uncle is going to travel in the last week of the month, my dear, and this will be your last week here, too. Let's make the most of it." Carlos left the following morning at dawn. He said goodbye to me, and as soon as he started the truck, I went to open the door to go to Christian's. Suddenly, I heard knocks on the door. It was him, asking to come in. I opened the door, and he said, "Today, I wanted to be here in this room and on this bed. Aunt, leave your mark. What do you think?" I replied, "I was only wearing a top. Honey, this week, I want you to leave your mark all over the house. I want you to leave every memory you can. Don't hold back." As soon as I finished saying that, he came towards me and started kissing me with all that youthful passion. He whispered, "This is the best trip of my whole life. Thank you, Aunt Clara." We played around all night and slept right there. The next day, my nephew was out taking pictures. We spent the day playing and sleeping. The next day, my nephew took his final exam for the contest. I went to the market and came back to find him already asleep. I decided not to wake him because he would be more tired with me in the coming days than with the exam. We spent the whole week as a couple. He went back to his city, and when the day came to leave, I thanked him for every moment we had lived that month. I'm surprised by you, Christian. Today, you officially became my favorite nephew. I said, laughing with double meaning. He replied, Aunt Jennifer, thank you for the time I spent here. It was a great learning experience. I told him that I was surprised by how much I had learned from him. I said that if everything worked out, I would come back to Florianopolis. I told him that if I started working, I could stay at his place for a long time. I said that I would love to have more fun with him. I said that I would come back if he wanted me to. I said that his door was always open. I'm thinking about coming back, but only if it's okay with you. If I start working, I'll be here in Florianopolis, so I could stay at your place for a long time. I'd love to have more fun with you. We didn't have much fun, but we could be even bolder. We talked for a long time until he finally left. I'm still waiting for him to text me to confirm the day he's coming. I've already told Carlos, and he said that Christian could stay here at home if you liked the video. Subscribe to the channel, comment, and leave a like.